Okay, part two. Anyway, so what was I saying? Oh, so I was on bed rest, basically, put myself on bed rest, and I was just gonna relax and try not to stress and have these pains coming because I didn't know what they were coming from. And so I was doing that, and then I was laying in bed, sleeping. I had slept for a couple hours, and I woke up to it gushing all over like the whole bed was soaked. It was ridiculous. Like, I woke up and it was like, just lots of water. Sorry, TMI, but, it was crazy. And I was like, wow, there is no doubt that that wasn't my water. Like, that had to have been, that is, I mean, I was 99% sure at that point. It was ridiculous. There was no questioning it. I was kind of panicked. I was shaking for some reason. I don't know if it was like a hormone reaction, but my body was just shaking, and I couldn't like talk. Like, Chris came into the bathroom, and like I called him. I was like, Chris, come here. And I'm like, this whole thing's gonna be TMI, so if you can't handle it, you should stop watching now. But I was sitting on the toilet. I had peed, and then it sounded like I was still peeing, but I wasn't. So and then it would stop, and then it would start again, and then so I'm talking to Chris, and I'm trying to explain to him what had just happened and what was happening currently. I'm like, I'm not peeing right now, and it just kept coming, and I'm shaking. And he's like, oh my god, like, this is really happening right now. This is really it. So I called my doula and told her, and she's like, yeah, so you're gonna go back in, right? And I was thinking about it, and I'm like, she's like, you know, if you stay home, like, you can choose to stay home and wait it out, you know, contractions start again, and then go in. But I was like, no, I want to postpone the baby being born as long as possible. And at that point, I thought I had the option of staying pregnant until I was full term, and that was my goal. I was like, I'm gonna stay pregnant until I'm full term. But then, you know, I'm thinking about it, and I'm like, the cord could be getting compressed right now. We have no way to monitor her heart rate. I have no idea if I have an infection right now. I have no idea if she's in distress. I have no idea, you know, cord prolapse can happen when the water breaks and the baby's head isn't engaged, and then she's premature, so she's tiny, she could have been floating. So all these things are in my mind that I know about because of my education, and I started to kind of panic, and I was like, you know what, I had this instinct. I was like, we can't stay here, we have to go in. So Chris had to drop me off at the hospital because Keegan needed to sleep, and we had no one to watch him. And so Keegan at the hospital would have not been good. Anyone that has a 2.5-year-old knows that him running around the hospital would have not been helpful. So Chris and Keegan just dropped me off, and I went in, and all by myself. My doula was at a birth, I think, at my friend's birth. And Chris and Keegan just went home to bed, and I was just updating Chris via text. So I went in, and they put me in a room, and I told them what happened. I have a towel in between my legs because I'm leaking so heavily that even a pad wouldn't cover it. So I went in, and I told them all what happened and whatever, and she did the... It's ridiculous. Okay, they hooked me up to the monitors, and then she did the paper thing again, and she's like, oh, it's negative. And I'm like, I told her this. I was like, you have to be freaking kidding me. Like, I have been here four times, like, whatever, 3 or 4 times. Every time I come in, it comes up negative. I am obviously leaking tons of water. You better tell me what is going on then, because this is not normal. And she's like, okay. So she calls the doctor that's on call, because we had the midwife, and so we just had to choose whichever OB was on call because I didn't have a backup. Because it's complicated, because I was switching midwives. I don't know, it was a mess. I didn't get to explain that all to you, but I can't right now because it's too much. So anyway, what was I saying? This is a huge story, a really long story. I don't know how many parts this is going to be, but bear with me. So she called the doctor that was on call, and it was this really nice doctor. She ended up being wonderful. We love her so much. And I mean, it was just like God giving us that doctor that was natural-minded OB compared to some of the other choices that we could have had. So thank God it was this doctor. So she said, we're going to do the paper again if I feel any gushes. If that comes up negative still, she's going to do a ferning test. It's where they take the fluid and they put it on a microscope. Kind of like when you do the ferning for fertility. They do that with your amniotic fluid, and if it ferns, then it's it's amniotic fluid, and if it doesn't, then whatever. So she was going to do that, and then if that came up negative too and I was still insistent, there's this invasive test, which she didn't think I wanted because they knew that I don't like, to have procedures and have, lots of interventions and whatever, but it's where they inject a dye in your uterus or into your bag, actually. Well, I'm not sure how it works, but they inject dye up there, and then they put a tampon in, and if the tampon gets ink covered, then your fluid is leaking, which I don't understand how they put the blue in there without damaging it. I don't know. It was just, anyway. So I was like, I don't think so, but we'll see what happens. So she checked again, and it was negative, and then she left, and she's like, tell me if you have a big gush, because I'm going to try to capture this. So at this point, all these nurses are coming in, they're talking to me, they're asking me all these questions, and I'm filling them in on what happens the last couple days and whatever. So what happened next? I decided to change positions. I rolled to my side, and all of a sudden I had this huge gush. And I like buzzed real fast, and I was like, oh, you need to come in and test. I just had a huge, gush of fluid. So the nurse ran in real fast, put the strip on, and immediately it was positive. So what was happening was that when they were checking it, because it wasn't gushing at that point, it was coming up negative. I'm not sure, but those tests are ridiculous, so don't trust them completely 100%. I mean, people with small leaks, they miss it all the time because of that. So anyway, yeah. So they were like, oh, yep, definitely ruptured your membranes, and you're definitely going to stay now. So I'm like, okay. And at that point, it was like, not that I was happy about it, but I was happy that they finally, realized that that's what was going on. Because I was, like I said, I'm scared at this point. My water has been broken for 4 days. Well, it was 3 days at that point. And I know the risk of infection, and I know I was scared for my baby and for me, and I was just kind of relieved that we finally had an answer. But at this point, I'm still thinking that the doctor's going to agree to me staying pregnant. So I was 35 weeks and a couple days at that point. I'm not sure the exact amount. 35 and 4, I think. Anyway, so the doctor, she came in, the nurse, and said, oh, well, the doctor wants to just induce with Pitocin right now. And I was like, no, I'm not doing that. I want to try to wait. I'm going to wait. This is what I agreed to. She wanted to start antibiotics because they didn't know my group B strep status, and because of the risk of infection for her. They wanted to do antibiotics every 4 hours and start Pitocin and just induce that right then and there. And I told her, I don't think so. I want to see if my body will do something on its own and try to keep the baby in as long as possible, but I will agree to antibiotics if it means that she doesn't have to have them when she's born. So she's like, okay. So she went and talked to the doctor, and the doctor agreed to that. And she said, okay, that's fine. You can do every 4 hours antibiotics tonight through your IV, and then we'll talk in the morning or whatever. And so, but I think she assumed that I meant, let's see if it starts tonight. But I meant, let's wait until it starts, even if it's in a couple days. So anyway, she came in, or they tried to do the IV. It took them 6 times to get the IV in, and they blew 3 veins, and so I have these huge bruises, and it was awful. They had to get the dean of the nurses to come in and do it. It was crazy. So, because it was so late at night, there was no phlebotomist or anything to try to do it, so that really sucked. So finally they got it in, pumped me full of IV fluids and this antibiotic, and we don't do antibiotics usually. We try to avoid them completely. We use natural things like garlic and other things like that to cure stuff instead of using antibiotics, and to have to get those sucked. But I knew that it was a sacrifice I was going to make if it meant that my baby girl didn't have to have them when she was born, because of the group B strep thing too. They just automatically give them to you if you have no results yet. And if you refuse them, then they give it to the baby and monitor them in the nursery. And I was not okay with that. So, sorry if I look at myself instead of the camera. Look kind of cross-eyed when I do that. Anyway, this is so long, I'm sorry. But I'm going to stop apologizing and just go. Okay. So, so the nurse just, told me, we're going to do this every 4 hours. I want to come check on you, whatever. They had me hooked up to the monitors. I tried to get some rest. couldn't really sleep at all. I think I got like 3 hours maybe broken up, because everyone's coming in to check on you and look at the contraction monitor and stuff. I was having no contractions at that point because I had taken that homeopathic remedy to stop contractions. So I was having no contractions or anything, and I think that's great. I'm like, sweet, I can stay pregnant longer, and I can be here, they can be giving me antibiotics, and it'll be great. But the doctor came in the next morning, and she talked to me, and she sat down, like she like squatted down and got low next to me and just like really had this in-depth, awesome conversation with me. She explained to me why she doesn't think, she thinks it's riskier she's like, I think it's riskier to keep the baby in at this point than to just have the baby, because the baby is, you know, she's premature, but she's late premature. And, you know, we think that she would do well, and she wouldn't have to spend any time, or the baby wouldn't have to spend any time in the NICU. But the risk of infection is insane, and it could mean that both of you die. Also, there's other risks, you know, associated with it. We just went over them. We went back and forth on it. I cried a lot, and, you know, told her my concerns about that, how I wanted to stay pregnant as long as possible. And I don't understand how if someone's 31 weeks pregnant, they do everything they possibly can to keep them pregnant, even though their water broke, for weeks, and how that's okay for them, but that's not an option for me. And, sorry. And she said, you know, she just kept explaining to me that, you know, because I'm so far along, that it makes more sense, and it's, you know, that's I don't know how to explain it, but she made me feel really good about it. Like, she shared studies with me, we discussed everything, we really talked it out. I mean, she was probably in there for 30 minutes, and it was amazing to have an OB that actually listened and talked to me. And you all know that induction is not something that I wanted. I wanted this beautiful natural birth at home, and because that became a reality without, it's like, I don't know, you get, when something like this happens, a complication, and you have to do something because of medical necessity, it's really hard to let go of that. Hi, Chris. I'm making a video. I'm doing my labor and delivery story. Okay. Okay. Bye, honey. I forgot to tell him that I was making a video. He's probably wondering if I was talking to myself. Anyway, so what was I saying? Oh, because it was like, I mean, it was important, and you have to think, well, what's the most important thing? Is it the birth that I dreamed of and that would empower me and that I was really looking forward to, or the health of my baby at this point? And obviously, you're going to do anything you possibly can to ensure that your baby is healthy. I could have left the hospital and went home, and I mean, you can always deny medical stuff, any medical advice, and stayed pregnant and risked having crazy infections, having the baby, I mean, she could have got meningitis, she could have gotten permanent brain damage, I mean, I could have got a uterine infection, had to have a hysterectomy. I mean, all those things are going through my mind. And I just think, you know what, I get to a point after crying a lot and just really, I had to grieve the loss of the birth of, you know, yeah. So I'm grieving that, and I just had like this good cry, and I got to a place I was like, you know what, I have to do this. I have to have this baby now. And it was a very, very tough decision, but it's what I had to do. I mean, and it's just, all these things are going through your mind, because you're like, if she stays in, it could be bad, but if she comes out, it could be bad. I mean, if the baby, sorry, I keep saying she because we know it's a girl now, but if the baby comes out now, she could, you know, it could have breathing problems, it could have all these premature issues, and be in the NICU and be away from me and whatever. But if the baby stays in, then there's all of this. So it's like you're fighting with yourself in your head, and it's very, very difficult. So what we ended up doing was I talked with her. She wanted to start Pitocin, but she said, I hate doing Pitocin, and I said, well, what about natural stuff? Can we try really hard to do natural induction methods first and see if those are going to work? And then after we give it our best shot, then do Pitocin as a last resort. And she was totally on board with that. I mean, this doctor's had 3 natural births herself. And so she's not someone that pushes medications or C-sections or anything like that. So she agreed to that. She said, you know, you can do the breast pump and all that you want to do, and I'll come back tonight and we'll reevaluate things and go from there. So I'm like, great. So I call my doula, and she's going to come, and I call Chris, and he has to get Keegan over to my sister's house, and then he was going to come, because, you know, I told him, he kind of panicked when I was like, oh, it has to be today, and I explained everything to him and why, and so he had to get Keegan taken care of, where we didn't know how long Keegan would need to be taken care of, so he had to bring him to my sister's and have enough stuff for, like, all night, maybe the next day. So he was doing that, and so everything was going to start once him and my doula got there. So I ordered food, and I was going to eat first and waited for them to show up. And then let's do another part. Gosh, this is so long. This is going to be like 5 parts. Okay, I'll be right back.